Have you ever felt like suffering was your birthright? Do you wake up each morning with a heavy heart, wondering why life seems to deal you one blow after another while others appear to glide through existence with ease and joy? Have you questioned whether you were somehow cosmically destined to endure pain, struggle, and disappointment as your primary life experience? If these questions resonate deeply within your soul, you are not alone in this profound spiritual inquiry, and more importantly, you are not condemned to a lifetime of suffering. The great spiritual master Paramahansa Yogananda, who brought the ancient science of Kriya Yoga to the Western world in the early 20th century, possessed profound insights into the nature of human suffering and the divine mechanisms by which we can transcend our apparent karmic limitations. Through his teachings, which bridged the mystical wisdom of the East with the practical needs of Western seekers, Yogananda revealed that what we perceive as a curse of suffering is actually a misunderstanding of our true spiritual nature and our relationship with the divine. According to Yogananda's profound understanding of cosmic law, no soul is born to suffer indefinitely. What appears to be a curse of perpetual hardship is actually the result of deeply ingrained mental and spiritual patterns that can be transformed through specific practices and a fundamental shift in consciousness. The secret that Yogananda shared with his closest disciples involves understanding that suffering is not our natural state, but rather a temporary condition created by our identification with the ego mind and our separation from our divine essence. The foundation of Yogananda's approach to breaking the cycle of suffering lies in recognizing that we are not merely physical beings having occasional spiritual experiences, but rather eternal souls temporarily inhabiting physical forms. This fundamental misidentification with the body and personality creates what he called cosmic delusion or Maya, which keeps us trapped in cycles of pain and pleasure, success and failure, joy and sorrow. When we believe ourselves to be limited, mortal beings subject to the whims of fate, we unconsciously magnetize experiences that confirm this limited self-concept. Yogananda taught that the universe operates according to precise spiritual laws, much like the physical laws that govern matter and energy. One of the most important of these laws is the principle of magnetism, which states that we attract into our lives experiences that match our predominant mental and emotional vibrations. If we carry deep-seated beliefs about our unworthiness, our destined suffering, or our separation from divine love, we unconsciously broadcast these vibrations into the cosmic ether, drawing to ourselves circumstances that mirror these internal states. The process that Yogananda revealed for breaking what appears to be a curse of suffering begins with a profound shift in self-understanding. Rather than seeing ourselves as victims of circumstance or karma, we must begin to recognize our inherent divine nature and our power to consciously participate in creating our life experiences. This shift requires both intellectual understanding and direct spiritual experience, which comes through dedicated practice of specific techniques designed to awaken our dormant spiritual faculties. The first essential element of this transformative process involves the practice of deep, scientific meditation. Yogananda emphasized that ordinary prayer and wishful thinking, while beneficial, are insufficient to break deeply entrenched patterns of suffering. Instead, he taught specific meditation techniques that enable the practitioner to withdraw consciousness from the external world and the constant chatter of the mind, allowing direct communion with the divine presence within. Through regular, deep meditation, we begin to experience ourselves as pure consciousness rather than as limited, suffering personalities. The meditation practice that Yogananda considered most effective for this transformation is Kriya Yoga, an ancient technique that he described as the airplane route to divine realization. Kriya Yoga involves specific breathing exercises, concentration techniques, and energy practices that systematically purify the nervous system and awaken the dormant spiritual energy known as Kundalini. As this divine energy rises through the subtle energy centers of the spine, it burns away the karmic seeds of past negative actions and thoughts that have been creating patterns of suffering in our lives. However, Yogananda emphasized that meditation alone, while essential, must be combined with a fundamental transformation in our daily mental habits and emotional responses. He taught that we must become vigilant observers of our own thoughts and feelings, learning to catch ourselves in the act of creating negative mental patterns before they can manifest as external suffering. This requires developing what he called divine discrimination, the ability to distinguish between thoughts that come from our higher spiritual nature and those that arise from the ego mind's tendency toward fear, limitation, and separation. A crucial aspect of this mental transformation involves the practice of affirmation, but not in the superficial way that many people understand this technique. Yogananda taught that true affirmation must be practiced with deep concentration, unwavering faith, and complete emotional involvement. When we affirm our divine nature and our freedom from suffering with the full power of our concentrated will, we begin to reprogram the subconscious mind and dissolve the deep-seated beliefs that have been creating our painful experiences. The specific affirmations that Yogananda recommended for breaking the pattern of suffering focus on our true identity as children of the divine, inherently worthy of love, joy, and abundance. Rather than merely repeating positive words, practitioners must learn to feel the truth of these statements in every cell of their being, using the power of concentrated attention to impress these new patterns deeply into the subconscious mind. This process requires patience and persistence, as the old patterns of thought have often been reinforced over many years or even lifetimes. Another essential component of Yogananda's method involves the cultivation of divine love and devotion. He taught that intellectual understanding and even powerful meditation techniques are incomplete without the awakening of the heart's natural capacity for unconditional love. When we learn to love the divine with the same intensity that we have previously invested in our fears and limitations, we create a powerful magnetic force that draws divine grace into our lives, dissolving obstacles and transforming our circumstances in ways that the rational mind cannot comprehend. This cultivation of divine love requires a gradual expansion of our capacity for compassion, beginning with ourselves and extending outward to include all beings. Yogananda emphasized that we cannot truly love the divine while harboring hatred, resentment, or judgment toward ourselves or others. The practice of forgiveness, therefore, becomes an essential element in breaking the cycle of suffering, as unforgiveness keeps us energetically bound to the very people and situations that have caused us pain. The process of forgiveness that Yogananda taught goes far beyond mere intellectual acceptance or forced emotional suppression. True forgiveness involves recognizing the divine essence within every person, including those who have hurt us, and understanding that their harmful actions arose from their own ignorance and separation from their divine nature. This recognition allows us to release the energetic bonds that keep us connected to past hurts and to reclaim the vital energy that has been locked up in resentment and blame. Yogananda also emphasized the importance of right action and service to others as essential elements in breaking the pattern of suffering. He taught that when we focus exclusively on our own problems and pain, we actually reinforce the ego mind's sense of separation and limitation. By engaging in selfless service and working for the welfare of others, we begin to experience our interconnectedness with all life and tap into the joy that comes from expressing our divine nature through loving action. This service need not take the form of grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. Often, the most powerful service involves simple acts of kindness, compassion, and understanding offered to those around us in our daily lives. When we make the conscious choice to be a source of light and healing in the world, regardless of our own circumstances, we align ourselves with the divine will and open channels for grace to flow into our lives. The transformation of our relationship with suffering also requires a fundamental shift in how we interpret the challenges and difficulties that arise in our lives. Rather than seeing obstacles as evidence of our cursed fate, Yogananda taught that we must learn to recognize them as opportunities for spiritual growth and the development of divine qualities such as patience, compassion, strength, and wisdom. This shift in perspective does not mean that we become passive or resigned to unnecessary suffering, but rather that we approach life's challenges with the understanding that they can serve our highest spiritual evolution when met with the right attitude and response. Yogananda frequently reminded his students that the goal is not to eliminate all difficulties from life, but to develop the inner strength and spiritual understanding that allows us to remain centered in divine peace regardless of external circumstances. This state of consciousness, which he called divine equanimity, represents true freedom from suffering, as we are no longer dependent on external conditions for our happiness and well-being. The practice of maintaining divine equanimity requires consistent effort and the development of what Yogananda called divine will. This is not the stubborn determination of the ego, but rather the calm, persistent application of our spiritual understanding in every situation. Divine will involves making conscious choices that align with our highest spiritual principles, even when these choices require us to act contrary to our immediate emotional impulses or social conditioning. As we progress in this transformative process, Yogananda taught that we begin to experience what he called divine magnetism, a subtle but powerful attractive force that draws positive people, circumstances, and opportunities into our lives. This magnetism is not based on external manipulation or wishful thinking, but rather on the natural law that like attracts like. As we embody more of our divine nature through consistent spiritual practice, we naturally magnetize experiences that reflect this higher consciousness. The development of divine magnetism also involves learning to trust in the intelligence and benevolence of the universe, even when we cannot understand the immediate purpose of our experiences. Yogananda taught that the divine is constantly working for our highest good, but that our limited perspective often prevents us from recognizing the hidden blessings within apparent difficulties. By cultivating faith and surrender, we allow divine wisdom to guide our lives in ways that our rational minds could never devise. Throughout this process of transformation, Yogananda emphasized the importance of patience and persistence. The patterns of suffering that we seek to break have often been reinforced over many years, and their dissolution requires consistent application of spiritual principles over time. He warned against the tendency to become discouraged when results do not appear immediately, reminding his students that spiritual growth follows natural laws and cannot be forced or rushed. The secret that Yogananda shared for breaking the apparent curse of suffering ultimately rests on the recognition that we are not separate from the divine, but are expressions of divine consciousness itself. When this truth becomes not merely an intellectual concept but a lived reality experienced in the depths of our being, the very foundation of suffering dissolves. We realize that we have never been cursed or condemned, but have simply been dreaming that we were separate from our source of infinite love, wisdom, and joy. This awakening to our true nature does not happen overnight, but unfolds gradually as we consistently apply the principles and practices that Yogananda taught. Each moment of deep meditation, each act of selfless service, each choice to respond with love rather than fear, contributes to the gradual dissolution of the illusion of separation that has been the root cause of our suffering. As we embark on this transformative journey, it is important to remember that we are not undertaking this work alone. Yogananda taught that sincere seekers are always supported by the invisible presence of enlightened masters and the grace of the divine itself. By opening our hearts to this guidance and support, we accelerate our progress and find the strength to persevere through the inevitable challenges that arise along the spiritual path. The process of breaking free from the pattern of suffering is ultimately a return to our natural state of divine joy and freedom. It is not a matter of acquiring something new, but rather of removing the obstacles that have been obscuring our true nature. Like the sun that is always shining behind the clouds, our divine essence is always present, waiting to be revealed through the dissolution of the mental and emotional patterns that have been creating our experience of limitation and pain. In conclusion, if you have felt born to suffer, know that this is not your true destiny but rather a temporary condition that can be transformed through the application of Yogananda's profound spiritual teachings. The secret lies not in changing external circumstances, but in awakening to your true nature as a divine being temporarily playing the role of a human personality. Through dedicated practice of meditation, affirmation, service, and the cultivation of divine love, you can break free from the apparent curse of suffering and claim your birthright of infinite joy, peace, and freedom. The path may require patience and persistence, but the destination, the realization of your own divine nature, is the most precious gift you can give to yourself and to the world.